world, the Great Awakening research. If the news is fake, imagine how bad the history is. What history taught us, what it actually was. What they teach versus what they didn't teach. The recovered old world and the repopulation turning it into the new world. Ancient sites are giant energy circuit board, in my opinion, to power the underground realm, which we have not discovered yet. Here's a fried motherboard, and here looks like about the same thing, with these burned out old world buildings that were over generating power and could have exploded, causing a massive catastrophe in the old world. Here is a picture of some devastation, but if you look at the red arrows in the background, there is a massive superstructure out of the view of the camera, and the yellow arrows show how big of an explosion could have happened to destroy giant stone bridges this big. Here's some photos of some buildings, but you can see they all have this antiquitech at the top that suck the energy from the atmosphere and power their civilization, or to possibly power what's underground in the underrealm. Every one of these spires has massive antiquitech and energy collecting apparatuses attached to them. Same with these old world buildings. You can see the white building in the lower left corner. It's a mud flooded building, so this would have been after the reset event, but most of these buildings, they've got them up and working again until they could get their own power source, and then they would tear these giant buildings down. This building was not built by these little teeny people at the bottom without any electricity. There is a massive cover-up, and we are uncovering more and more each day. Lots of remnants of these old world buildings can still be found. A lot of them are abandoned, but this is why they don't want you going out and exploring looking for these things, because the more we look, the more we find. Just total devastation of this old world, and then they slowly rebuilt it and repopulated. They would show off these massive city structures in these exhibitions or these world expos, and then the narrative is they would tear them all down because they were temporary. But many of the structures that were built, if they did last, are still up and can be visited today, like in San Francisco and other places. But just the building is second to none. Everything is far more advanced back then, especially if you take into account the free power aspect of the old world. And this is basically what they did. The old world is on the bottom and the new world is on top. Everything is a cheap knockoff, just like everything the satanic elites do. It is a cheap, lesser version of what we had before, and then people get used to it, and that becomes the norm. Chicago, Illinois, Buffalo, New York, St. Louis, Missouri, San Francisco, California. All the same types of old world Greco-Roman architecture, massive superstructure, buildings all made out of stone, and the insides are twice as nice as the outside, with paintings and carvings, and all this was done by a primitive people heading out west from the East Coast. Very, very deception based. When you understand, when you put this collection of all these buildings together, it's just, you can tell they're lying. The official version of our reality is not what we have been told, and we can see that these little teeny people have nothing to do with the buildings of these giant buildings. And then if you've seen my previous videos, you'll understand that there were giants. The giants were the advanced culture that built all of this whole realm-wide area, and these beautiful buildings and great civilization of peace and clean and free energy. And then something happened. They all vanished, and a new group of people moved in, reclaimed the old world, and then began building it out and commercializing the old world. Here's a perfect example. You see these old world buildings, old style with the free energy, and then in the bottom corner you see all these billboards and all this crap where these inheritor people came back and repopulated and then did a cheap version of what they saw. But there still is a massive cover up, and we do think that underground, this is why we get into these underground wars and stuff. Underground is where a lot of these giant people went. And here you see underground corporate transport, where they're taking people underground and moving them where these underground trains might go out of the realm. Because you can't leave our world going up. You would hit the firmament or the dome or whatever's up there, and the only way to escape is to go down. Very interesting. You can see just an abandoned old world, and then slowly nature overtook the old world. And if there weren't enough people or enough resources, it would just be lost to nature. But if it could be repurposed, it was, and they would slowly come in, and through possible cloning, they would clone massive armies of labor force or children to slowly retake the old world. And then when the children would get to a certain age, they would stage these massive wars to kill off and depopulate, and then they would regrow more clones and repopulate again. And then by the time you get 3 or 4 generations, whatever version of reality or history you wanted to teach them, that became the norm. Here you see Greco-Roman architecture alongside pyramids. Very interesting when you understand that these ancient cultures were all a part of one culture. It wasn't ancient Egyptians, ancient Romans. Whatever timeline and history that they've taught us is completely false, and it was just a made-up version of reality. For Columbus and all these people did not exist. It was all false in order to explain the civilization that they found. I mean, the building style is second to none. You can't build this stuff today. Everything is like cheap stucco and plywood, and when they built this old world, they would tell you they made everything out of stucco and plywood. But that's how they build today, and things last just as long. These are stone buildings, fixed stone buildings that will last thousands of years, and they did last thousands of years. And anything they couldn't explain, they would bomb and blow up, and they could say it was a war or great fires or earthquakes or whatever. Cover story was needed to cover up this massive civilization that they found. This is why they're the founding fathers. They found an entire civilization, highly advanced, and reclaimed it for themselves. This is where the term Freemasonry most likely comes from, is these people found an entire civilization created from masonry blocks, and they got Freemasonry from this work. Here, I mean, you see this, just the carving, everything. This can't be carved by hand. This was highly advanced technology through lasers and creation physics, whatever they did, but it is second to none. Nothing of today compares to anything like what we had in this old world. Massive cities, completely abandoned, no one to be seen, no people around, just vast, massive buildings and cities completely empty. And then slowly through repopulation of the clones or the incubator babies or the orphan trains or whatever you want to call it, whatever happened, they slowly got civilization back on track, and these controllers invented a new history, a new cover story that the people would believe in order to get civilization back on track, where they can keep people slave workforce and harvest them for whatever was needed. Completely flat, massive layout with no people. And then slowly, as the people would get more and more, they would slowly destroy the buildings and stuff they couldn't explain or what they didn't need. Now they say these are construction photos, but if you look, it's completely, the top is blown off and there's rubble and debris all around the base, meaning that it was already built and something happened which caused massive destruction. Here's some before and after pictures. Here's just massive mud flooded area, and they're not building this. They came upon this and found it and got it back on track. We're all just pieces of data, carrying information, moving through a circuit system that has been designed to siphon off our spiritual energy or louche energy, completely using the creative force of God, which are humans, into a slave force of just nothingness and pointlessness. Here's more photos, and once again you see the blue arrows. The size of these old world people were much taller than the people of today. They were all on average 12 to 15 foot tall, and that makes more sense, plus their technology of how they built these buildings and these massive megalithic structures. We have to assume that all these people in these paintings were also of gigantic size, 12 to 15 foot tall. There's no small people around because they were the reset people that were cloned from the genetics of these giants. Here's another before and after. I don't know when these were painted, but you can see there's so much hidden below the ground that they're not telling people, and that is where these elites go. They can't leave in spaceships. They go underground to these unreset areas deep, deep below the surface. Here's two photos, 1941 and 2019. They would invent a war, cause cause two different versions of fighting, and in order to completely wipe out all the buildings and anything they couldn't explain. It happens over and over again. This looks like modern day New York, and at the bottom photo, there's one or two of these tall towers left, but they all seem to be docking stations for airships, which is another way these old world people might have escaped our realm. San Francisco World Fair 1915, San Francisco 2023. The only thing left is the structure at the bottom, the exploratorium, I guess it's called. But recently I've taken a trip to this. It is massive. How big, clean, and just highly advanced, other than New World creations or buildings. And some event it was the mud flood, but we see 1860, everything's mud flooded out. Trying to pinpoint the exact date of these mud flood events, when everything was covered in mud and when they tried to get civilization back on track, and how they had to destroy all these buildings in order to fit their narrative. It makes you think about all the hills and mountains around you. What's underneath them? Is it pyramids? Is it all pyramids? Really interesting, this conspiracy theory, I guess you could call it, but this is more than a conspiracy theory. We have drummed up enough truth and enough information and facts to show that this wasn't a temporary thing. This was a massive cover-up of human history and deleting the old world, getting rid of Tartaria, hiding the mud flood from people, creating the narrative of dinosaurs and millions of years to hide the giant bones you would have found, and all this other stuff. Now, these pictures of flying cities are from the Gulliver's Travel book, which I think is a very factual book when you understand what they've been hiding from us. Highly advanced civilizations with flying cities, and that could be one of the places that these old world people went. And this ties into this Gulliver's Travel with giants hiding the truth in plain sight in children's books. And there's some more very interesting things. Now, I don't remember what year this is from, but if you look down in the corner where the arrow points, it says Gulliver's Travel, the book. And then in the close-up picture, you see through the Looking Glass. Now this connects with all the other information that we're talking about, because when you get into Project Looking Glass, going forward in order to look back, going backwards in order to see forward, to see what happened, when did it happen, and how would we fix it. Now this is an artist rendering, but it almost looks like a docking station for these flying cities. These massive cities could levitate. Most likely, if you had free energy, you can make anything rise and fall with a certain amount of energy. Anti-gravity, whatever you want to call it. And then you could float your city to another area and land, depending on where the people wanted to go. Very interesting when you change your perspective and imagine what could be possible. And then a great flood happened. Is this the biblical great flood, or is this a second great flood? Were there massive old world dams for these 100-foot tall giants? And if these dams would have blown up, the entire realm could have been flooded, causing this mud flood event. Then we get into the mud flood, where whenever they dig around these structures, they find other structures and buried civilizations all hiding. This goes also with the railroad deception of the Transcontinental Railroad, how they did not build any railroads. They excavated the railroads that were already there, because all these railroads were old world technology, and everything old world was repurposed. And if it couldn't be explained, if it was too free power, they would get rid of the invention and keep people on a way to they can be controlled. This is through oil and gas or crude oil. They got rid of all the free flying machines of the Zeppelins and stuff. And now we're even phasing out railroads when you see all these derailments and stuff. Railroads are very cheap, and they want everybody driving an electric car in which they can hoard you into a 15-minute city where you'll never escape ever again. All these railroads were excavated. They were not created. More pictures of the mud flood. So whatever happened, by getting the correct, figuring out when these buildings were actually built and understanding that they were all mud flooded, we can kind of figure out that this mud flood event most likely happened between 1780 and 1820, I would think. And then it's my understanding that by 1850, the new version of reality was put in place. The stories of history were taught to people, and that's when the resetting of civilization got back on track, was around 1850. Once it was on track to a certain point around 1890, that's when they would start getting ready for massive wars and to blow up and get rid of the buildings or anyone who didn't go along with the new version of reality. They would stage a war. They would come in with cloned armies of people and completely kill off all the natives. Now, this could have also been what happened to the Native Americans, is a cloned army or a cloned fighting force, replicated whatever, went in to exterminate the old world inhabitants. And anyone who didn't go along with their new narrative would have been killed and wiped out. There's lots of evidence for this. The next video is on human cloning I'm going to do, and it will really get into this topic further, proving these points with factual events. Here you can see just under the ground, these buildings keep going and going and going, and who knows how deep they go. They could go miles under the ground. They could go all the way to a hollow earth or something. We do know that whatever the official narrative is completely false, and we have to start reevaluating all stories and versions of reality to get to where we need to be. Just widespread destruction, widespread mud flood, and then you get into these star forts. What is the purpose of these star forts that are realm-wide? They're old world technology combined with architecture. Were they a weapon system? Do they connect to something underground? We don't know, but I think we will uncover their purpose and the truth of these massive structures. highly technological, highly advanced architecture, and we right now don't understand the reason. The mystery of these things is being investigated, and we will solve it if we keep looking and digging and doing our own research. Everyone, do your own research. You can find me on Mud Fossil Research and Truth, Mud Fossil Truth and Research on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter in the box below. I'm on Rumble and BitChute at Modern American Gangster. You can find me on Mud Fossil Research and Truth on YouTube. This video should not violate any terms of service, so I will try to upload it to YouTube as well. You can get my book with a lot of this information in it. It's called The Great Awakening. You can get it on lulu.com. It comes in 2 units. Unit 1, Timeline of Historical Events, where we go through all of known history, document what their version is and how it's false and what might have been going on beneath the curtain or behind the curtain. And then there's Great Awakening Unit 2, Continued Points of Study, where we get into more of the kind of mainstream conspiracies and figure out what might be going on with them. There's Unit 1 and Unit 2 together in a digital version or an ebook, or you can get the Great Awakening Unit 1 and Unit 2 in paperback, both versions together, which is really the way to go because it covers everything in kind of a chronological version. You can donate to my PayPal. I would really appreciate it. I do all this work. I do tons of research. I'm going to keep putting out videos every Monday and Friday, but if you'd like to donate, it would really help out. Mudfossil 124875. I also make music you can listen to. Give it a listen. I'm on Spotify and Apple Music as Modern American Gangster. I'm on Amazon Music. You can find me on n1m.com. All free. Give it a listen. Check it out. I put the audio versions of my videos on this n1m, so if you just want the audio to listen to, you can find it there. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, follow. Leave me any questions or comments below if you have any suggestions for videos. I'd love to hear it. Thank you for checking it out. Hope you guys have a great weekend. The end.